I'm going to wipe my
We're
screen.
live now. Hi. Thank you so much for joining us here at our Hangout on the topic of social media in fashion. I'm Sophie Seawright. I'm the content editor at Pure London. At Pure, we think that social media in fashion is a huge opportunity for retailers, but it's got a few inherent challenges within it. The immediacy of the contact that you have with your customer means that the social media message and the messaging that you have, the DNA of your brand needs to be really on point to make sure that you're not suffering from that direct contact with your customers. The reason we're thinking about that at the moment is because we're in the process of curating the content for next year's Pure London. In case you're not aware, Pure is the UK's largest fashion trade show. It takes place in Kensington Olympia in February, and it is where a lot of the UK's boutiques and also the larger multiples come along to buy their annual stock and also to identify the new designs and brands they might not have thought of stocking before. I run a lot of seminars at the show, and during the research for those seminars, lots of key themes emerge, and we're going to do some good hangouts on those particular topics. So thank you so much for joining us here for our first one. I am thrilled and very lucky to be joined today by Rachel Arthur, who is the Senior Editor of Digital Media and Marketing at WGSN. She's joining us from New York today. Hi there, Rachel. We're also joined by Rebecca Falconer, who is here in London. She's Communications Director for Matthew Williamson, which is very exciting. And they're going to share some ideas with us on how to really make the most of the social media that you have and the access you have to your customers, which is obviously a huge opportunity. Hello, ladies, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, lovely to be here.
Can I start with you, Rosanna? Thank you so much for taking the time. Could you just tell me a little bit about what you do at Matthew Williamson and what your social media strategy looks like at the moment? Can you hear me, Rosanna?
I can. Sorry, there was a brief cutout there, but I think I'm back in the game.
You're back.
I'm completely back. So yes, we just got to the point where you said, what do I do here and what's our social media strategy? Am I right?
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I've been at Matthew Williamson now for 2 years. I was employed first of all as head of digital to really begin the digital revolution here at this brand. The first thing I did was launch the social media strategy, and then we actually relaunched the website the following year. So, I mean, a great opportunity was that Matthew gave me a lot of time to work with him very thoroughly on the brief for the new website, which was a full e-commerce offering. Now, the social media strategy really took time, and it was very important to me to work closely with Matthew on that, with the founder of the brand and the designer of the brand. But I think first and foremost, something that's crucial to mention is that I am a lifelong fan of Matthew Williamson, and Matthew, you know, knew, because I used to be at the British Fashion Council doing digital marketing there, so I had met Matthew in my role and kind of worked with him on digital projects there. So it had become very apparent to him that I was a digital strategist, but also a big fan of his brand. And I think that's crucial to say. Really, with a digital strategy, you need to know the brand inside and out and back to front. And I was equipped with that before I even began the job. I used to do voluntary tours around his exhibition at Somerset House once a week to everyone from kind of big groups of students to mothers and daughters. So I knew the brand very well. And one of the first exercises we did when I began was really break down the brand into our pillars of DNA, so color, print, bohemia, and then begin to think how can we, and various others, it's not just those three obviously, I think it was about 8, and then just began to think about how we can apply each of those to the social platforms. Also counting out some social platforms. We didn't want to rush into anything. I think there is a real impulse for brands to rush, and yeah, we didn't start on all of them straight away. And then obviously my role has progressed. It's been fantastic in the last year. 2013 was our most successful year for online sales ever, and then 2014 so far we're up 230% at the moment. And so yeah, it was last month, my role has now expanded to oversee global PR strategy as well, and just overall communications messaging as well. So it has expanded and it's very exciting.
Fantastic, that's really exciting. What brilliant progress, and that's great that you're so into the brand yourself, and obviously you're then able to represent the brand from a really personal standpoint and avoid the slightly sort of corporate communications that more
Exactly.
traditional marketing can fall into.
Yeah, I think that can be. It's inevitable that it would happen, but I think particularly brands feel a pressure to employ a social media expert. But I would often advise employ somebody with a passion for your brand, because actually the basics. I'm about to do myself out of a job. No, I'm not, because I do more than just social media. But I think the basics of social media can be picked up from the right reading the right websites, reading the right beginners guides, that kind of thing.
Sure, perfect. Well, we'll touch on that a little bit more later in some detail. Rachel, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at WGSN over there in New York, and also what trends you're seeing coming through at the moment, or what changes you think are happening in social media and fashion?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, as you said, I'm the senior editor on digital media and marketing here at WGSN, which basically means that I report on the likes of Rosanna and all that she's doing at the brand, but in a broader sense, kind of look across across retailers, across fashion designers, in general around the world, and kind of explore how they're using all their different communication tools available to them, and in what way. So kind of tracking those trends, kind of tracking the landscape and everything that's going on, particularly with digital at the moment, whether that be from a very highly innovative perspective down to the nuts and bolts of the kind of daily grind with your communication strategy. So super broad. Obviously, we cover basic advertising, still those print campaigns, all the way up to the most forward-thinking social strategies. And I kind of do that from New York, as you said, where I also oversee our market intelligence coverage. So that's anything to do with kind of retail and business in the landscape. So a bit of a varied role, but obviously gives me a really nice perspective on exactly all that's going on, and able to kind of keep on top, as we said, contextually with all of those trends. So some of the stuff we're tracking, I guess the main thing at the moment is really, it's almost as Rosanna said, it's working out. A lot of brands aren't kind of doing this throw things at the wall and see what sticks kind of thing anymore. It's being a lot more strategic in their approach to social. So that's been a really positive development, I would say. Probably only really over the last 12 to 18 months has that particularly become the case. And I think maybe the easiest way for me to explain it is that here at WGSN, one of the things we always used to get asked by our clients was, what's the next Facebook? Which platform should I be on? What do I need to know about? What's next? What's next? What's next? And actually, that's evolved quite significantly to the point now where people turn to us and they say, how do I use Facebook or actually maybe more likely the likes of Instagram and Pinterest and Twitter and Tumblr? How do I use them to their absolute utmost ability, get the most out of them, and how do I differ what I'm doing across each platform? And so there's a real kind of sophistication that's coming along with social now, which is a very positive thing to see, as opposed to, as I said, this desire to just jump on what's next every time. And that's not to say that jumping on what's next isn't is a bad idea. We're still seeing a lot of experimentation in the space, which is a very positive thing too. But it's kind of balanced with this underlying maturity, really. And I think that comes along from the fact that the brands are understanding better how to use the platforms, but the platforms themselves are also becoming more mature, because we've kind of grown up experimenting on them as they have too. And this is really early days in all of these brands. For Facebook, it's still a very early time, and that's probably the oldest one that we're using. So that's kind of what I'd say is the main focus, is this real sense of approaching it with a much more strategic head attached, and not just assuming that your social media is going to be run perhaps by your intern or by somebody that's in more of a junior position. It's very central to marketing strategy now, which is definitely the case across a lot of brands, and if it isn't in some of the others, then it certainly, in my opinion, should be.
Perfect, thank you. And speaking of those different platforms and the sophistication there, Rosanna, you've got a really strong voice in your social media, Matthew Williamson. Could you give me a little bit more detail on how you decide exactly how you're going to present the brand, particularly perhaps across the different platforms that you're using, because potentially the audience differs?
Of course. So I'm a tone of voice obsessive. I'm also a grammar and punctuation obsessive. That's lesson number one. But so when we went through these steps of coming up with the brand DNA, I think it was also Matthew and I began to think about who is our woman, how would she speak? And it's this idea of this feminine, sexy voice. I mean, Matthew, if you ever meet him in person, he has the most fantastic sense of humor. So with humor mixed in, but I think that comes across more on Matthew's personal output on social media. So the brand tone itself is really that feminine, playful, fun voice. It needs authority. We are a brand. It is the third person, and I think I haven't really seen luxury brands being able to speak from a third person voice in a like matey way very well. I think you need to maintain that tone if possible. But certainly, so first of all, if I deal with Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus, and well now Pinterest, they all stem first of all from our online magazine, the MW Daily, which has the byline "A Different Kind of Print," which I like because it's not a magazine in print, but it's also, we are a brand that is all about print. So that's our content hub. It has new stories, well, a new article each day, which goes into, it might be one of 5 features, feature kind of sections. And then it's from there that our social media is pulled and we put our content out across the platforms. So one thing we faced there, and the way we confronted it, was we still wanted to have personality in our social media and to have that sexy girl vibe that is difficult to capture in the third person. So we came up with an online character. She's Matthew's muse, the English Rose. Her identity is a trade secret. I think there are a couple of people in the company who know who she is, but all of her stories are true. She has a fortnightly column. She has fabulous clothes. She has affairs. She has a lot of money and goes on. Well, I don't know if she goes on a lot of amazing holidays and to amazing events. And she also has great tips about where to go in London, where to go on holiday, and crucially what to wear. That section of the online magazine is one of the most read, and it has a very long dwell time, and that people really kind of read it and absorb it. So that's how we add the fun to our brand voice, by inventing that character. I think that also takes the onus off Matthew. There's a lot of pressure on designers to do everything for a brand, everything from an interview to a feature to the social media. So that therefore meant that Matthew could concentrate on the platform that he loves passionately, sometimes obsessively, which is Instagram. And we founded that a year and a half ago through a week-long takeover with Net-a-Porter, which was brilliant because it just got us a great following before. It got us a great following. I think we had 20,000 followers by the time Matthew actually did his first post. It also gave Matthew a lot of confidence in the platform and was fantastic to see what an audience that big responded to and what they liked. And yeah, Matthew loves that platform. We continue to try to innovate in various ways in it and also to team up on it.
Perfect. Okay, lovely. And Rachel, looking at, obviously, Rosanna's got a fantastic strategy in place there. Have you seen any other sort of techniques or trends in that particular area? So making sure that your DNA for your brand is really consistent and is coming across really well on social media.
Yeah, I mean, I love what Rosanna said in terms of the idea of using a muse for it. And I think, what we always say to brands is the main focus needs to be to, act like a human, don't act like a company. And, so often we do still see those kind of errors being made, even if it is that third voice. And I think, that human can be all sorts of different things depending on what kind of brand you are. So, are you funny? Are you a little bit tongue-in-cheek? Are you informative? Or are you actually using your social media mainly for customer service? And all of, once you've worked that out, it really helps define what that voice is, because they're very, very different outcomes. Somebody once told me, actually, somebody that Rosanna and I know quite well, that the way they were approaching it was to think about 3 different words when you're building out your strategy, and that is, as a brand, do you say hi, hey, or hello? And I thought that was brilliant, because actually, if you think about each of those words and the kind of person that would say them, that really is very, very, very specific kind of an outcome. Admittedly, obviously, sometimes you might use a mixture of them, but actually, it does help to really define who you are as a brand just by something as simple as that. And I think building out that kind of tone of voice focus is really important for a brand. At the beginning or at any other stage, in fact, is to just kind of take a step back and sort of say, what are we trying to achieve here? If you don't have something that's as quite specific as Rosanna has managed to achieve by having that persona built into it. And I think the other thing to remember, is that a massive part of tone of voice is not just actually what you're saying, but what you're showing. And that visual identity side for social media is so important these days. And we've really seen, obviously, with the likes of Instagram, but even the reworking of all of the other platforms in terms of being very visually led first, that there really is that big focus, and the kind of the quality of the images that you're putting out there is absolutely essential. So I definitely say to brands that you need to think about your visual identity just as much as your tone of voice and how that all ties together. And obviously Matthew Williamson is a wonderful example of a brand that is able to do that so wholeheartedly tied to the strategy that it feels incredibly on brand. And I would say someone like Michael Kors is probably another example. What I love about Michael Kors is that if you look at that brand, if you see one of those images popping up on your Instagram feed or in your Facebook feed as well, you it's Michael Kors. Like, it's so distinctive an image. It's very jet set. It's very aspirational. It's also quite accessible, but it's just, most importantly, it's absolutely beautifully shot in every single occasion. And I think and again, a really great example of brand that's tied that together incredibly well. But also, I'd say from a tone of voice perspective, and I'm giving a couple of US examples here. Apologies, but that is where I'm sat. So I tend to gear myself that way. But there's the likes of Kate Spade, brilliant example of a brand that is able to kind of pull together a real sense of, they use the word color all the time, but actually I would use the word color for describing what they're doing. It is really colorful in terms of what they're saying, but also what they're showing, and they use different hashtags really wonderfully. And they do something like live colorfully and travel colorfully, and they've got an incredible campaign out at the moment for the holiday period with Anna Kendrick starring in it. It's on YouTube. I 100% recommend going and checking it out because it's really cute. It's very quirky. Again, this is a brand that manages to be very humorous in its approach to social media, but does so in a way that makes it okay to also show a lot of product. And I think that's that balance is quite an interesting one for a brand. How do you maintain kind of showing the lifestyle of the consumer that you're trying to reach, but also tie in the product throughout without it feeling too much like a sales pitch. And again, Kate Spade, definitely a great example of that. Another brand, and this is a menswear brand, but I use it quite often as an example just because from a tone of voice perspective, it's one of those ones that's really worth going to check out. This is a shorts brand in the US called Chubbies. And this is brilliant because they have their entire tagline is built around the theme guys out, thighs out, which basically, as you can probably imagine, does of course tie to those really short shorts, but it also ties to this idea of a consumer who is kind of that fraternity bro, as they would say here, but that kind of the really sort of lad culture that we have in the UK as well. So very much about that kind of young guy who's on the beach, but also he's going to hot dog eating contests, or he's going drinking with his buddies, and it's kind of that whole persona is entirely tied to exactly what the brand is trying to portray, and it is so funny. I recommend highly going to check it out. Go onto their website. They've got this wonderful list of rules that a guy should abide by, but also they have this really great email marketing too that again I would say is worth subscribing to because it's so humorous, but just a wonderful example of a brand that is able to tie it through in every single piece of marketing it puts out there. Feels so incredibly on brand, which is really quite an achievement. And as I said, it's just hilariously funny. And I have to say, I think Rosanna's got a wonderful job doing something at Matthew Williamson, but I can't imagine what this guy that runs social media at Chubbies must be like, because he literally every day, his job is to go to hot dog eating contests. So he must be absolutely loving it.
I think the theme then is that it's pretty accessible. The success in social media, creating that really strong voice, is not something that you need to throw lots of money at. It doesn't involve loads of people. You just need that really strong identity and personality, perhaps of a kind of a fictional person, or perhaps of the designer himself, or of a retail premises. But what it does take is a lot of thought and a bit of preparation, a bit of imagination, creativity. So it's not something to just kind of shoehorn on the end of the day when you're really knackered from the rest of your day job. It's obviously a lot of thought going on here. Obviously, these are big brands, but I think there's takeaways there for much smaller companies as well.
Yeah,
Sorry. Yeah.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
It's funny on a Google Hangout. I can't tell if you can hear me when I'm going, yes, I agree. But throughout Rachel's moment just then, I was nodding wholeheartedly and agreeing particularly about the image and how image is so important. We are fashion brands. That's really what people want to see. And I think I personally, I am always really disappointed to see a luxury brand posting an image if it's blurry, if it's anything but top quality. Instagram is no excuse, and applying a filter on an already poor image will only improve it ever so slightly and cover up really a botched image. Matthew always says that whether it's what we say or what we post visually, everything we have on social media shouldn't just add to the noise, because there is a lot of noise. It has to have integrity and we have to believe in it. And you can tell really if you're at the helm of a brand or if you're doing the social media for a brand. If you're not comfortable with something, you usually don't have confidence in it, so best not to post it. Best just to be quiet for the day.
Absolutely. Okay, so once you've got your fantastic identity, you've got your very strong social media in place, one of the things that our retailers struggle with sometimes is figuring out the link between social media success and the monetization element of it. And I was just wondering, Rosanna, if you could talk me through whether you're using social media directly to achieve increases in sales and how you're tracking that and what your thoughts are on it generally.
Absolutely. Okay, so our approach to social media at the beginning, I didn't put sales pressure on it, and neither did my founders, obviously Matthew and Joseph Velosa, who was CEO at the time and is chairman now. We approached it with the incentive, first of all, to build brand buzz and build a story around the brand without having to go through the filter of the press, and build excitement around the brand. There is a lot of stories at Matthew Williamson, a lot of stories. That sounds funny, but if I were to demonstrate with the design right behind me, each design has so much work that goes into it that it really, I do feel like each design has its own little narrative. So that was our first aim, and then I think pleasant surprise has been the wrong word for the ROI that we have seen in it over the last 2 years. I knew that there would be ROI, but we just needed to wait to build that following, to build that loyalty, also to connect with current customers on social media and for them to realize that we do have a presence and that it is something they would want to follow. So the one that we have seen ROI most clearly, I think at present, is Instagram. That's Matthew's personal output. He sees it as his purest brand vision, and he posts there daily, often more. The one that really became apparent was the first day of our sale this summer, where Matthew put up just a really clear, well, I mean, we're never going to do a red sale sign at this brand. It was a hand-painted sale sign with all of the S all made out of flowers. It was pretty gorgeous. But to announce the sale and to announce that it had begun online and in store. And that was our busiest day we've ever had online anyway. But it became particularly interesting that evening when I was going through each order and tracking the source of each one. Obviously, a lot were inevitably through our email marketing, but there were these new customers. And with any new customer, I always follow up personally saying, to introduce myself, to ask them, say I'm here if they have any questions in future, but also to say how did they discover us. And there it was, Instagram. And I think that kind of tracking is actually really important, because Instagram doesn't have, you can't do a hyperlink in the post. Your only ability to do a link is actually on your profile page, which usually for us is obviously MatthewWilliamson.com. We had a very special flash sale on Friday, on Black Friday. It was Matthew had curated an edit of some of his favorite catwalk pieces from the last 2 years. And for that one, we experimented with the trick that bloggers often use, link in bio. So the post he put to announce the flash sale, he said link in bio, and I had changed that for that day only to a direct link to our flash sale. So that's a little tip. But yeah, so that's one. And then I think it's also, Instagram has been great for us to get not only new customers, but daily engagement for our VIP customers with Matthew. He replies to every comment. If he sees somebody wearing us on our brand hashtag OMW, he'll inevitably like it or comment. He loves seeing the women in his designs, and that connection to them is so important to him, because before he could only get that if he came to the store, if he met someone at an event. So yeah, Instagram, I think, has been really, really exciting for us. But I'm delighted to say that we've been on Pinterest now for just over a week, and last time I checked, we had 56,000 followers, which is a whole new audience for us.
Be impressive.
I checked off the weekend, and I took a step back. I was delighted. We have been putting obviously a lot of work into that platform though for 6 months. We had already 1,000 pins before we'd even launched. They were just all on private, and we did a great team up with Grazia to launch that. But bringing it back to the question, I'm very excited about that platform, because obviously if you read about it, and I'm sure Rachel can tell us more, the demographic there is mainly female, 30 to 45, and a kind of high spending demographic. So it ties in well for a luxury brand with the kind of customer that you would be trying to reach.
Perfect, thank you. And Rachel, on Pinterest and Instagram, would you say that's the highest ROI you're going to get from social media, or are you seeing anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. Again, it really varies brand to brand for sure. And a couple of things that Rosanna picked up on, are massively relevant. I mean, first of all, the idea that the traffic's coming from Instagram through that one link doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But actually, it's even the idea that that the ROI, obviously, a lot of the time, it's very hard to actually directly track, obviously. One of the things I always find really interesting is the tales that we have from people coming out of stores, and Nicholas Kirkwood recently launched on Instagram, particularly across social, but with a big focus on Instagram and on YouTube. And actually they're saying, within the first couple of weeks of launching, they had people coming into their stores and saying that they're looking for the shoes that they saw on Instagram. So it was just, again, a direct example that you can't distinctly measure it, but you can definitely see it's going to have an impact. And then the other thing I think, super interesting that Rosanna brought up was, of course, Black Friday. And, huge in the UK this year, obviously momentous as always in the US, even though overall sales were slightly down year on year. But I think what's interesting about that actually is to see the social media effect that went alongside. And excuse me whilst I look down a little bit, because I have got some statistics. I'm terrible at remembering numbers, but there was apparently some 2 million conversations around the words Black Friday in the 7 days leading up to that period on Twitter alone. So, significant amount of chatter around that thing. And the reason I think that's so pertinent is the fact that, if people are talking about Black Friday, they're talking about shopping. It's not like you go on there just to mention about something to do with Black Friday, unless you're maybe complaining about the fact that there's so much going on with Black Friday. But in general, a lot of that conversation is going to be around the idea of shopping. So tons and tons of conversation happening, people very engaged on social to actually go and buy. And interestingly, some further statistics that came out actually from IBM show that the amount of sales that came off the back that led from social were particularly relevant from Facebook first and Pinterest second. And I think that's really interesting. Obviously, we're not talking pure luxury at this point. We're talking broad retail. We're not even necessarily talking just apparel. But I do think it's super interesting to know. And for reference, this is in dollars, but on Black Friday, average order value numbers were $109 for Facebook and $100 for Pinterest. So, quite an interesting gap between them, not huge, but the conversion rate from Facebook was at about 2 times the amount of Pinterest. So really, really interesting to see that that's happening. I think particularly it's hard to know. That those statistics don't tie to the spend that's going behind them from a marketer's perspective. And I know Rosanna's definitely got an opinion on this, but we certainly feel that Facebook is much more a pay-to-play kind of platform these days. So I imagine the people that are seeing the decent conversion rates off there are also spending a lot of money on there. To be quite honest, and Pinterest obviously does also have that as an option, but I think maybe that's a little bit more of an organic platform, largely because of the fact that when you're on Pinterest, I feel like the people that are there, and I say I feel like, this is proven, the people that are there are much more there from a kind of with the mind of shopping. You're there curating a board based on wish lists and such like, whether it be for home goods or for apparel. And whereas on Facebook, it's much more of a conversational space. Obviously, you're not going there directly with the purpose of shopping. So a bit of an interesting one. Obviously, I think with Black Friday as well, maybe it's a little bit more relevant from a conversion perspective, because it's much easier on a day like that to really do the hard sell. Even a brand like Matthew at that point can definitely get away with just saying it's our sale, come and shop with us, because people are expecting to see that on that day. You do that the rest of the year round, you probably get a little bit more pushback, but it certainly works. It works on that side. And I think maybe the other really interesting thing to say is looking at Instagram, and of course there's some really clever workarounds going with that, the link in the bio side of things, as Rosanna mentioned, but also we're seeing a few other brands experimenting. Every now and again we'll see somebody putting in a shortened link, for instance, in the comments underneath a product. I think Topshop does this every now and again. But also there's a lot of brands starting to experiment with with a lot of the third-party platforms, the apps and the startups that are out there that are trying to make Instagram shoppable. And these are a little bit clunky at the moment, but there's a couple. There's one, Like to Know It. It is one example from Reward Style, and this is, it's a fairly simple premise. I use it. You basically go onto their website, log in with your email address and your Instagram account, and now when you're on your Instagram account, if you see a post either from that from Like to Know It, or you see it from another brand that has that tag in place, and you like that picture, you will then receive an email with the detail of the product in that picture. So as I said, a little bit of a multi-step process, because obviously you get that email. From that email you then click to the e-commerce site and then you can buy, but it is a workaround at this point in time while there are no direct links in Instagram. So I think seeing more and more like that. A few brands have experimented with it directly. Michael Kors launched their own one on Instagram, so same process that you could do directly with Michael Kors, and Marc Jacobs has recently done it with their beauty line. So a few experiments happening in this space, and I think that kind of social commerce side is like an entire world that's about to be massively unlocked. And the reason being, and we talk about this a lot at WGSN, is that with all of these things, it's about consumer readiness, right? So a couple of years ago, everybody was trying with Facebook commerce, and it flopped really badly. There was a couple of examples of brands that did it, and they saw a bit of success, but it was based off of the idea of novelty, and it didn't actually have any staying power, because generally speaking, the consumer wasn't interested in it, and in general, I think Facebook was the wrong platform. At this point in time, we're getting to the point now where consumers are much more savvy about what they're doing, and actually, in a lot of these cases, they are there, and they are really highly interested in shopping. So I think we will see this world start to explode as the consumer becomes ready, and then the platforms start to integrate the kind of tools that make all of that possible. So that's something we're really highly tracking and expecting to see nothing short of explode over the next 12 months or so.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it sounds like we're kind of getting there with all of those various functionalities. Can I quite briefly, Rosanna, get your opinion on Facebook? Because a lot of our retailers would use it really as their primary social media. I know you've got some fairly strong views on it, and I think it'd be really beneficial if you could just enlighten us a little bit.
Oh, well, I think people see it as the primary social media platform because it does have the biggest reach. It was the one that was around. It was around first. I think it also, every generation has a profile on it, from my youngest cousin to my oldest uncle. So you can't obviously deny its power. But I should have said earlier in the Hangout, all of our followers, all of our following is organic. I've never spent any budget on social media. I prefer to spend it in other ways. So we don't actually spend on Facebook, which has made an impact, particularly in the last year, when they really rolled out the strategy that obviously they want your post to be able to be, they want you to be able to target your post to the perfect fan or consumer. And so they rolled out a very targeted advertising strategy, which is fantastic, I believe, and I'm sure Rachel could tell us more for those who choose to use it. But because we do not, yeah, our just engagement is right down, and it has coincided with that. So yes, I don't know.
That's perfect. It's just nice to get your view on it, because I think that, you know, you stated that in Pinterest and Instagram have much more success for you, and I think it would just be good, you know, just to throw the idea out there that Facebook, although it has its value, it is quite costly, and it perhaps isn't as targeted.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it is costly now if you want to make an impact. I mean, particularly bear in mind we have a following on Facebook of 40,000, but that came about in the years when you didn't have to, the phrase pay for followers is slightly incorrect, but you didn't have to spend to get your following in. Nowadays you really do, or you have to come up with some pretty savvy digital marketing to get that following up. So I just personally, I feel that there would be wiser ways to spend your money, and particularly if you're starting out a social media strategy, have a look at the other platforms which don't rely on they aren't so tied to your budget.
Perfect. That's great.
I'd completely agree. But sorry to butt in. I would just also say that, you know, 100% it has become a pay-to-play platform. The algorithms make it very, very hard to find any kind of level of success with engagement if you're not spending some money there. And you know, when we say spend money, it has to be a significant amount these days too. But that said, it is still one of those platforms that I would recommend for every retailer and brand that you categorically have to be on, but I wouldn't necessarily spend significant money on doing so. Just a matter of kind of ticking that box so that you have a presence, because, you know, as Rosanna rightly said, you know, this is the platform with the biggest kind of reach in terms of just numbers of users and active users at that. So I think it's just one of those cases of just needing to be present for that very factor of people. If they're looking for you, you need to be able to be there, just to kind of, as I said, tick that box really.
Yeah. Okay. And if we're on the subject of platforms where it's good to be there, I'm a huge fan of Google Plus because of the effect it has on your SEO. Google has in the top right hand of the page, if you search by brand name, a space that without a Google Plus page is filled by Wikipedia, but with an active Google Plus page, and crucially it has to be active, you can put that, you know, you can put your daily social content in that area, which is prime in Google, and you know, otherwise you'd be having to pay for that kind of face and presence. So
I completely agree.
Yeah, good.
Also, I was going to say what's nice about Google Plus is the fact that I think it's one of the platforms you can, and they probably won't like me for saying this, and sorry, we're on Google now, but the fact that you can actually use it very much as a replication platform. So I would say it's absolutely fine to push through Google Plus what you push through your other channels. I'd say you need probably a more focused approach to each one. You know, you need to be doing something different on Instagram, obviously to what you're doing on Facebook, obviously to what you're doing on Pinterest. But I think Google Plus you can replicate because it's more just about having content that's going through. You probably won't see much engagement with that content, but from an SEO perspective, that's really important. But also, you know, for the kind of people that Pure is relevant to in terms of the kind of retailers that are engaged with you guys and brands, then it's, you know, it's enormous from a local business perspective. That's hugely valuable. You know, it's not just the SEO, but it's the fact that it's tied to maps. It's tied, you know, it's tied into that kind of local business perspective. If somebody's searching for you and it brings up immediately your boutique at the top of the search results because of the fact that you're tied to Google Plus, that's a massive, you know, success point above the like organic search side of things. So I completely agree with Rosanna. Really, really important to think about Google Plus, even though it does not feel like it's relevant to social overly from an
And
engagement.
on that theme, actually, just before we wrap up, because we're coming towards the end now, do you have any sort of practical takeaway tips for our retailers, bearing in mind that a lot of them are independent boutique owners? If you can imagine yourself into that situation and tell me one thing that you think, perhaps debunk a myth, or tell me one thing that you really think should be their top priority. We've covered a lot of things, but is there anything we haven't gone over yet?
I touched on it briefly at the beginning, just that I have friends in all sorts of industries who will get in touch with me saying, I'm taking on the social media side of my company, or I'm looking to employ someone, could you come and sit with me and teach me Twitter or give me lots of advice? And actually, the first thing I do is send them a link to Mashable, and they have a section called Beginner's Guides, and then also particularly the Beginner's Guide to Twitter, which is from Twitter. Twitter have a great blog with also. I was actually on the Twitter blog last night because I needed to work out how to do something complex on that app, and it's brilliant. The Twitter team puts so much effort into making it really no nonsense, very easy to understand. I think Twitter, more than any other platform, is shrouded in mystery for a lot of people, and it shouldn't be at all. They've made it very user-friendly now. So my myth I would like to debunk is that it's not as complex as I think some social media executives might like to say that it is. And really, if you equip yourself with, first of all, knowing your brand, and then taking some time to understand each platform, and then you should be in a reasonably good place to start. So I would say take advantage of the resources that the platform puts out themselves.
Great, thank you. And Rachel, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the myth that I would like to debunk is the idea that you need to be on every single platform. I think it's really important, especially as a small brand or retail owner, that you really genuinely think about the fact, not just going with the one that has the is the kind of platform of the moment, for want of a better phrase, but more about the idea of who is your target market, who is your consumer, and where are they spending their time. There's no point in putting all your efforts into Instagram if actually your user is somebody that would never in a million years have an Instagram account. But they might be all over Pinterest. So really spend time right at the beginning researching who your consumer is and where they're spending their time, and focus your efforts as a result on those platforms. That said, it's there's obviously a lot of value in doing more than one. Doing several of them, and I'd say on that basis it's really important then to think about each one differently, for the very same reason that there are different people on different platforms. So focus your efforts in a slightly varied way. Make sure you're not just replicating the content, as I said before, from one to the next. So there's a real point of difference around them, but also don't be afraid to experiment. As much as we've said the real importance of kind of ensuring that quality with the visual work that you're putting out there, I would equally say if suddenly there's a platform like Snapchat and your target market is that kind of young millennial, digitally savvy, whatever else, and is using Snapchat, which believe me there are millions of people that are, then give it a go. And if it doesn't work, don't worry about it, shut it down. Don't feel like there has to be this really bureaucratic approach to starting social, because the beauty of social media is that you're forgiven very quickly. So you can jump on something, give it a try, and if it doesn't work out, shut it down and move on to the next one. So I'd say, yeah, don't be afraid to experiment, but also just ensure that you're kind of going with what makes sense for your brand, as opposed to what the press in general is saying is the kind of the most popular at this particular point in time.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap us up there. But Rachel, can you just tell me what your Twitter handle is in case anyone wants to follow you?
Yeah, sure. It's at Rachel_Arthur.
Great. And Rosanna, what's yours?
I'm at Rosanna. That's all.
Nice.
Same terms with Twitter. So do tweet me any questions anyone might have.
Great, thank you. And if you'd like to follow us, we're at Pure London. The show takes place in February, and you can check in there for updates on when our next Google Hangout's going to be. The website is purelondon.com, and I am at London Sophie with a Y, on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us. We really hope you found it useful, and I hope you have a really great Christmas, both at home and in your shop as well. Thank you very much for joining us.